welcome to the Self-Storage Made Simple podcast. I'm your host, Thaddeus Campbell. Very, very grateful today to be joined by the Director of Acquisitions for DXD Capital, Cam Paktinak. Cam is somebody that I speak to regularly, one of those people in the industry that when you talk to him, it's just very apparent his depth of understanding about what's going on in the self-storage world. I rely on him often to kind of pick his brain and figure out what's going on in this wonderful world of acquisitions and self-storage, specifically DXD concentrating a lot on ground up development. Things have been a little crazy, so I'm very excited for the next half hour to get some serious insight from somebody who's on the forefront. Cam, cannot thank you enough for joining me.
No, Thaddeus, I thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So when we do this Self-Storage Made Simple podcast, we always start at the beginning. I always like to get a little background of like, this is such a niche asset class. We're in this kind of wonderland. We've talked about this. It's kind of an odd asset class in that people are so kind. It's really a small community. I always like to kind of figure out how people got to this place. How did you get involved in real estate to start and end up in the self-storage asset class specifically?
Sure, that's a great question. I mean, I often say no one grows up dreaming about being in self-storage, but man, are we happy to be in it once we are. So, just to step back a bit further, my entry into real estate really started as a passion from when I was a kid. Growing up, first generation, we rented a home, and it was always a dream to be able to own something. So, the minute I graduated college, I called the banks almost every week and kept asking, am I pre-approved for a loan? And after about a couple of months of asking, they finally said, you are. And that really is what kick-started my real estate passion. Started looking for housing, found the dream home. It was after looking at every house in the vicinity, 50 houses that fit those criteria. And when I came across that one, I knew it was going to work. And at that time, I was in financial services. And I said, man, I love doing this way more than my day-to-day job. So I knew that I needed to make a switch at that point. And I went into commercial real estate, started as a broker because that was the best way to learn about real estate. And I had no prior background of that. And from there, I remember, I was working in a small market, and Tom Gustafson, who was heading up the Collier's self-storage practice at that point, said, hey, we're starting this up. You can have the whole Northeast if you'd like. We'd love to give you the opportunity to join. And is that something you'd be interested in? And not knowing anything about storage, I jumped on the opportunity and quickly realized that that's the asset class that I want to be in. And through that time, it's been over 10 years now that I live and breathe self-storage, and so grateful for that opportunity.
I love that story. I know you and I are both native New Englanders. You come from Connecticut.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about college and then getting out into financial services, your family growing up, whereabouts in Connecticut, and
Sure.
How did that serve as an advantage to you, or maybe a disadvantage when it came to getting into the commercial real estate market?
Of course. So I grew up in Lower Fairfield County, a town called Darien, Connecticut. And, one of the funny things about DXD, I always say it's like a good trivia question. I grew up in Darien and I moved to Littleton, Colorado. And our founder, Corey Sylvester, grew up in Littleton, Colorado and moved to Darien. So we flip-flop there. But yeah, I grew up in a town that, it was very close to New York City, and the main driver there was finance. So growing up, I thought that was the path to take, and going to college, that's what I studied. But I always had that, little piece of me that loved real estate. Ever since I was a kid, I said, always looking at real estate. In college with my dad, I convinced him to go and get a piece of property in upstate New York. And I thought that was the extent of my real estate career. And again, once I got into financial services and seeing the day-to-day, one of the things I loved about real estate, and didn't really have a strong network of people to reach out to, but what I saw was that it was a tangible asset. It was something that you could build and drive by day to day, and be proud that you were part of that project. So I reached out to my network. I'm a big believer of networking. No matter what, no matter when, you network, and one day either you can help someone, hopefully, and you'd always be able to get help from people in that nature.
I was going to go down that path. It's such a common theme when I talk to people on the podcast that it's much more about the network oftentimes than it is about any particular skill that you might have. Now, of course, we've got to do the work and we've got to put the effort in and we've got to educate and learn the things we need to know. But so frequently it's about getting into the right rooms with the right people. And obviously in your transition to Colliers, that seemed to be super important.
Very important. As I think about every step I've taken in my career, it's always been with the help of someone that I knew that got me my foot in the door to take that next step. And also one of the most rewarding parts of this job and what we do on a day-to-day basis is being able to help someone else out. And you and I were talking about this, Thaddeus, the last week, where we're saying that one thing I love about the self-storage industry is that to the extent we've always been able to help each other out. Everyone's willing. There are no closed doors and hidden books, because we know that if I can help with information on your end and you can help with me, then all of our projects are going to be successful. And that's the mindset to continue to keep. And I hope the industry continues to keep as we continue to grow.
It's super interesting. I got into this much later than you. I'm a little less than 3 years I've been in the industry, but it's something that stood out to me so quickly of how kind people are and how willing they are to work together. Very different than any other thing that I've ever, and I've been in a bunch of careers now, 50 years old. I've had a few different things that I've been involved in. Very, very different than
Yeah.
anything else I was used to. And I think that one of the reasons that is because storage has been so successful for so long, right? People have been able to be successful. As you said, we're so thankful. I've been saying that ever since the Fed hiked interest rates and everyone got nervous, like, hey, I'm really glad I'm in self storage right now, even
Yeah.
as tough as it's been for us. And it hasn't been
Mhm.
the easiest, the last 12, 16 months, 18 months haven't been the easiest by any stretch. However, still rather be here than anywhere else. And I think maybe that's a
100%.
little piece of why people are so forthcoming, because
Hmm.
there's not that like, it's not, nobody's feeling like, that they're going to lose something if they help
Right.
somebody else. And that hopefully, and as things have gotten a little tougher in the last year, it hasn't changed. It's
Right.
been the same.
Yep.
Hopefully that continues further down the line. I
Exactly.
wanted to ask you. You brought up Corey Sylvester. I'm a big social media guy. I'm on social media all the time. When I say big, like I'm on it. I'm not big
Hmm.
like Corey Sylvester is. Super well known on LinkedIn. Has
Yeah.
one of the, if not the most well known people speaking about self storage. And so I wanted to pick your brain a little bit. Corey came from a data background. Started Radius Plus, which is, for those of you guys who are not super into self storage, is a data platform that almost everybody I know in the industry uses to go and get demographic data and data about other facilities and self storage. Tell me a little bit about working for Corey and working with DXD, and kind of the correlation between the data driven Radius and how you guys operate.
Of course. So, one of the first things I can say about Corey is, when I joined the team in 2020, it was I was a second employee here, and it was his passion and his belief on what he was looking to build at DXD that gave me the confidence to take the leap to be able to join the team that's just starting out. And, his main driver has always been two main things. One is culture, and making sure that you have a healthy culture in your company, because we understand that if you're happy and your employees are happy and your team is happy and working and you're all working towards the same goal, you're going to be successful. And that's one of the things I love about kind of what he's created here at DXD. And the second piece is efficiency. So, when I first started in self storage, when I found a site that I wanted to do a little bit more due diligence in, I would go to Google Maps, I would shape the site, see what the 3 mile radius is, type in self storage, find all the facilities, and if I looked at a deal in the summer, it was great. In the winter, it was not so great, based on rental rates. And it would take me, depending on the market, half a day, sometimes a day, to get all that analysis put together to really just understand, what does this market look like? Corey, they in Radius, they saw that inefficiency, and that's what led them to create Radius Plus, which is, now I can type in an address and within 3 seconds find out all that information that would take me, a day or a half to be able to do. Now, what he's continued to do is, well, that mindset of creating an efficient process, taking bottlenecks and breaking them up and making an efficient process is what we have translated into DXD, and it's become kind of the ethos here in how we do everything. Last year as a team of 4, we were able to analyze 7,500 deals, of which we were able to underwrite 400 and get a handful that were moving forward. And without an efficient process, that's not possible. So one of the things he's created is what we're trying to find a cooler name for it, but it's called the listing monitor, right? We get all the listings that came out every 24 hours. It puts it onto our database. We overlay that with an understanding of where the market rates are, what the market demographics look like. We're growing it into understanding zoning as well, so that when we get a list of 100, we're quickly able to knock out 80% and focus on the ones that are really going to make sense for us. And that process, along with everything else that we do, from the sourcing of the deals to the actual development of it, entitlement of it, and construction, is how we as a team carry that mindset of efficiency. And if we see a bottleneck, we work to figure a way out to use technology to our advantage to basically break that up.
It's so interesting you brought all those metric numbers up, the KPIs, because it was actually my next question. We had talked last week, having a conversation about just a general one of those talks that we have, and you had mentioned those numbers to me, and they blew my mind. I know you're not working with a staff of 50 or 60 people, right? You had a small team there,
Yep.
And to look at 7,000 sites. I mean, I if you haven't ever done this is what I do for a living too, so I understand the gravity of that takes a massive amount of time, and you literally can't spend 5 minutes on each of those and
Right.
get through, because it's not the only thing your whole team is doing. You also have to then go, you got to negotiate a contract if the thing works. You got to keep track of the things that you already have. There's other things that have to be going on at the same time. So really fascinating to have you break down kind of how do you go to 7,200 sites and look at them and then choose. Listen, you're picking really about 5, 6, 7%. I think you said you underwrote 400 of them on a deeper level,
Yep.
a really small percentage in the grand scheme of things, to really end up with maybe a handful of deals total.
Exactly. And that process, that's exactly what that is. I mean, it took it takes a couple of things. It takes the mindset and the technology that we're able to have here at DXD and continue to grow, but it also takes a team that's truly passionate about looking at these deals and really motivated to continue to grind day in and day out. And I always say very grateful for the team that's here. Because you could have all the platforms in the world without this team, that wouldn't be possible. So yeah, we call ourselves deal junkies. I think it's even more than that. We get excited when we see a deal come through, and we just get after it.
I think it's so fascinating, and I want to kind of get into the psychology of this a little bit. And you talked earlier about the importance of the people, and it becomes a matter of who you surround yourself with. I think because look, if you're looking at 7,200 deals, if you're and a deep underwriting takes some time, like those 400 deals that you did an underwriting of, that's not a 2-hour process. That takes some significant amount of time and energy to maybe get less than 5 deals. Man, there's some psychology that's involved in that, of dealing with that massive volume of failure to get to a couple things. How do you make sure that you keep that mindset to be able to get through that much work?
Sure. Well, that's what I view as truly my main focus when I'm dealing with this, is to keep the morale of the team where it needs to be. And it's having the right people. We have an awesome team of go-getters that's ready to get in day out. And last year was a tough year. It was a tough year when you're looking at deal after deal, and they're just not coming through to what you hoped they would be. And I think there's a couple of things that attribute that. One is I'm a big believer of getting together every morning and just having a group discussion and making sure that we can prioritize. If we can, as a team, make sure we prioritize what's important that day, the execution of it is a little bit more seamless than having everything come at us all the time. So we always made sure to prioritize what our focus was each and every day. The second thing, I'm a big believer of it. It might seem cheesy, but humor. I think humor is something that a team needs, and it brings some, brings some energy, and it makes some situations that might be tough a little bit lighter. So, we have a lot of these little buzzwords and things that we use in the office here that, just make us laugh. And I think that's a major component, especially when things get tough, to be able to continue to do. And the third thing is communication. Last year was a really tough year in the sense that things were changing on a daily basis. You'd come in, construction prices were X one day, Y the next day, interest rates are rising. And, the way that we try to stay ahead of it is just continuously communicating, over communicating to the point so that, we all knew where we were going, again, to be able to prioritize. And you put those together with the right team. It's, it wasn't all, roses and everything every day, but, we got through it. And once we start to see the fruits of our labor come together, it really helped to be able to continue that motivation moving forward.
You talked earlier about Corey and this idea of being able to paint the vision and how clear it was for you that it was the right place to go work. How much more important is that vision? Look, 2020, 2021, it was not hard to make a piece of raw land pencil in most places, right? In 2023, it was like needle in a haystack difficult. It was two totally different worlds. How
Yep.
important is it to have that vision and that clarity? Even more important, I guess, in a year like last year.
Oh yeah, it is. Again, I put that up top at the top of importance, and that's where that communication comes in. And it's funny, you go to business school, you go to all these different classes, and there's, you get to learn economics 101 and all the different things on how to underwrite, but there's really nothing about communication that we get to learn, right? It seems like we do that through just trial and error, but when you get into these difficult circumstances and maybe the tough markets, that's where, I think the things that we might take for granted become really important. And it's just like you said, it's being able to properly communicate. What is this vision? Yes, we're not hitting it today because we don't have the number of LOIs that we were hoping to last year, but what are we doing that's allowing us to get to that? It might take us longer to get to that vision, but what are we doing to get to that point?
Tell me a little bit about Cam Paktinak and what it is that drives you outside of DXD to keep that kind of mental perseverance, even when things are that challenging.
Sure. Well, I'd say there's two main things. The first is being part of this team. I always say that, the way that they've built this DXD and the team is you don't want to let your team down. So, that's a major driving force every day to make sure that, I know everyone else is doing everything that they can to get things done. So I'm going to do the same thing, and we don't want to let each other down in that sense. So that's a main driver. And the other one, which is, the primary driver in everything I do, is family. So I'm blessed and lucky enough to have an amazing wife at home and have two young kids. And, day in and day out, when times are tough and you need a little bit of, I guess, something to push you, have their pictures behind me. And that's a main driver for me in being able to do what I do every day.
Love that. You and I are very aligned in that. We've talked about that before, about how important it is, because there's days when it's not easy, right? You talked
Mm-hmm.
about that. As much as you try and keep a positive attitude, you keep humor. We all have those days where you got to dig a little deeper to figure out,
Yep.
what is it that's going to make me make this next call or look at this next site, or be kind to the people that I work with, because I just don't feel like it today. And
Exactly.
having that family to fall back on as a drive is an awesome reason. I'm going to change courses a little
Sure.
bit. Connecticut to Littleton, Colorado. Where does that come from? By the way, you know this, and I've talked about it. I'm glad
Yep.
you got your shades closed. I interviewed someone else in Denver for the podcast a couple weeks ago, and he had his shades closed too. And I'm very thankful, because if I see the Rockies, I start getting
Yeah.
mad because it's so beautiful. Tell me a little bit about that change and what precipitated it.
Sure. So, the main thing was my wife and I, we come to Colorado on vacation, quick trips all the time. And the main thing we love, we're just big in the outdoors. We love outdoors activities. And more importantly, we love the weather out here. So, COVID happened. I was in Connecticut. The real estate market actually started doing pretty well. So, we came to the conclusion where it's like, okay, we go on vacation there all the time. Why don't we make the effort to move there? And it was a crazy idea. But everything kind of came into place, and my daughter was just about to start kindergarten, and it was just the right timing. And family was one of the main reasons why we made the move. And man, we've so blessed and grateful for it, because it's just been an amazing move for us, and kind of next chapter in our lives. But as far as work as well, it was the perfect place for us to start to open an office for DXD. We have projects we all like to say, from Hawaii to Nantucket. And being able to be kind of central to the country, to be able to easily access all those markets and all those sites is a huge benefit for us. So, when I brought the idea up to Corey and the partners, and kind of what we're looking to do, they quickly said it's a great idea, and joined out here. And I joined the head of our debt and finance department, Chris Bailey. Awesome person, awesome guy. And he had the toughest job out of anyone this past year, trying to get debt for deals. And we opened the office here together, and have slowly been able to expand it.
That's awesome. For whatever reason, Denver seems to be a hotbed for self-storage. You folks are one of a few different groups that are centered there. One of my best friends in the world, Barry Sherman, who's been in storage since the 1980s.
Yeah,
If you don't know Barry Sherman, I got to make sure I make that introduction for you. He's
sure.
just a world-class individual. But it's, for whatever reason, a hotbed, and also a hotbed for actual storage facilities, not just groups doing storage, but that market is kind of insane.
Exactly.
Kind of not a terrible place to be based if you're and listen, that has its advantages as you're trying to build a team and you're in an area where storage is not a brand new thing.
Exactly. And it seems like, especially as we're trying to grow a younger team, most people are open to the idea of moving out to Colorado, which is great.
Yeah, not a tough sell to look out the back window and see the Rockies and get the
That's
weather
great.
you guys get. So I want to dig a little bit. We've kind of alluded to how tough 2023 is, and I want you to talk me through a little bit of the specifics of what happened in the market. You're underwriting deals. You're trying to get a ground up construction project to pencil. Tell me some of the specific things that happened. And, everyone kind of knows the broader idea of prices going up, and that affected construction, of course, and interest rates going up. But tell me specifically, how does that impact you when you're trying to underwrite a deal?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, if we think about the market and what we had to deal with, there was kind of three main buckets. You mentioned two of them: interest rates, construction cost, and the third big one was rental rates. The volatility in all three of those caused for, constant challenge of being able to try to be ahead of it, and understand kind of what is causing this. So last year was really a test in trying to understand, has the market dynamic shifted? Is it that, especially with rental rates, that people are using storage less? What is going on within the market that's causing this? On the construction side, how can we be as on point with our construction costs, but give the cushion to be able to be comfortable for the volatility that came in place? And on the interest rate side, it was just being able to be ahead of it, and having the right team in place, like we have, like the gentleman, Chris Bailey, I mentioned, being able to be on the forefront, talking to banks, and be able to get things done. The main thing for underwriting, and we were talking to Thaddeus, is, a lot of people look at square foot per capita as the metric for understanding supply and demand within the market. We have a little bit of a different thought process, in the sense that, we look at rental rates, because if I'm in a market, I used to do all my deals in the Northeast, and Long Island was a big market of mine. And I know there are certain pockets of it where if it goes above 5 square feet per capita, that might be low on the national average, but you might have some issues there. And then you look at Las Vegas, and they're in the low teens, and pricing and occupancies are still high. So we look at rental rates, and what we noticed in the beginning of last year was that rates just started to plummet. 30% drops in markets that were otherwise healthy. Like, there was no dynamic shift in those markets that would require that large
I'm
drop.
only smiling because of the pain that I also endured in trying
we
to
all
navigate.
exactly. You're trying to scramble to understand, and we started to compile all the data, talk to the industry, understand what's going on. And what we realize is that the REITs, which drive a lot of the major metro market rates, started this implementation of dropping asking rates to get people in the door. And the ECRI program, or if you're just getting into self-storage, existing tenant rent increases, those were the things that were starting to take place, but you wouldn't see it naturally as someone who's just looking at rates on Radius or any other platform. So we did a couple of things. We rented units. And all the markets we're in, we just went and started renting units just to understand how the dynamic was working. We spoke to the industry to see, what kind of rental rate increases are taking place. And we tried to use, we secret shopped facilities to understand what was going on. And we tried to just pull as much data as we possibly could to be able to come up with our understanding of rental rates in the market. And be able to get comfort with, we might be a premium to what we call teaser rates, but if you look at achieved rates and in-store rates, we're actually well below it. And these were the things that you had to do to be able to get comfort with a deal and hopefully be able to get deal locked in.
It's so interesting you talked about that. And listen, I love it. You went and spent money, right? Like, it's not cheap to go rent, because you're not going into one facility and renting a unit in just one place and trying to understand the market. 2, 3, 4 units in different facilities to try and understand the market. That's the cost of doing business. On the flip side of that, we're not talking about a house that might sell for 600 grand.
Right.
We're talking about a self-storage facility that might sell for 20, 25, 30 million, right? So you put a few $1,000s in on the front end and it's not fun. It's not easy, but it's an opportunity cost that you sort of have to play. I was going to ask that because one of the biggest challenges that I've seen, and listen, I use Radius, the rates that you pull off of a facility on Radius right now is what we were using to kind of determine if we're going to go to the bank and get a bank construction loan. We've got to have some type of pro forma to show them what we think it's got to be. And it's got to be based on some evidence somewhere of what's going on. If we don't already own facilities in that market where we can show the actual achieved rates, and all of a sudden those rates on Radius were not even close to indicative of what was really going on in a lot of these stores. So how do you pick? I get it, you go rent facilities, but if you have 4 units in a market, the bank is not taking your word for that. I'm interested to know if you guys have kind of figured out a way to, hey, how do we get the bank to come in and give us a loan?
Sure. Yeah, well, that was certainly one of the difficulties that we had to figure out how to overcome is, rental rates that we're using versus what's on Radius or different platforms. And we went about it a couple of ways. The first was, when we were talking to banks, we made sure that whichever group that they went out to on the appraisal side understood self-storage, because nothing is more dangerous than having someone that doesn't understand storage try to learn it on the fly and put together an appraisal. So we always made sure that that was something that was at least understood, that when you go out you can use someone that has that background. The second piece was we would actually at times lower our leverage a bit because we knew the bank was going to underwrite to X, and it might be 60% the way that they're underwriting, but with the way that we're underwriting might be less. So we underwrite a little bit lower leverage to give us that cushion in case there was a delta between where we anticipated rental rates to be and where they came in.
What they were seeing. So you pivot and you adjust and you do what needs to be done, right?
Exactly.
The fun of the game. And
Yep.
we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and it's why I keep smiling, because as challenging as 2023 was, and quite frankly, 2024 is, I guess, maybe a little bit better because we sort of have, I think the hardest thing about late 2022, early 2023, nobody knew where the Fed was going to stop, right? And we're doing construction. So you're not going to get your loan a month after you underwrite this facility. It could be 6 months, a year and a half before you get a construction loan.
Correct.
Find me the guy in 2020, 2022, beginning of 2023, who knew exactly where the Fed was going to stop. Right. It didn't exist. So you were kind of like, no concrete information, right? That's kind of the worst place to be. So fortunately, got into this place in 2024 where it's a little more, we kind of have a clearer idea. Nobody knows for sure, but seems like we're going to hold steady now. The point I was trying to get to was, listen, you get rewarded for perseverance in life, right? You make it through a year like, second half of 2022, 2023 into 2024. And there's some guys that are going to pull out of this game because it can get frustrating. So I love the insight you gave on to how do you build a team around you that allows you to fight that struggle. Because if you sign someone up and you said, hey, you're going to have to go look at 7,200 pieces of land to
Right.
get less than a handful of deals,
Mm-hmm.
most people they're not gonna want to do that. So I love that insight. As amazing as it might seem, Cam, it's been a half hour. I try
Right.
and honor the audience. I always tell people, try and listen to it on 2 times speed. We
Sure.
sound really cool. You can listen to the whole podcast in 15 minutes. If you want to take your time and listen to it in a half hour, all the best. But want to honor your time. I know you got a wife and 2 young kids that I want to
Of
get you
course.
back to. Again, I'm so grateful. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again sometime. Thanks so much for joining the show. This is Self-Storage Made Simple. I'm Thaddeus Campbell. That's Cam. Both of us are always looking for deals. Cam, if somebody has a deal that they think they might be interested in getting to you, what is the easiest way to get a hold of Cam Paktinak?
Sure. It would be cam@dxd.capital, or you can find me on my LinkedIn page and send me a message. And yeah, exactly that. It's always looking for deals.
I am the same way. I'm always looking for deals. You know how to reach me. All my social media handles are there. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you got something of value out of listening to Cam on the podcast, reach out and give him some thanks. Also make comments and let us know what you thought. Any questions you might have that you want to follow up on, I'll make sure that I get those answers for you. Again, can't thank you enough for your time. And guys, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Thaddeus.